IBC Young Adults, we're really excited that y'all are tuning in for our next edition, our next teaching on good news people. Today we're going to be exploring relationships and how the gospel impacts the way in which we relate to one another. So Camille is our Young Adults coordinator at IBC, and so she's going to be teaching us part one of two parts on relationships, so I really hope that you enjoy and benefit from what she has to say today. If you haven't been a part of our Thursday night gatherings where we kind of dig into discussion in small groups on this teaching, we would really encourage you to do that. Or if you have a friend that maybe hasn't gotten plugged in somewhere, we'd love for them to be a part of our Thursday night gatherings. So if that's you, reach out to one of us on our social media platforms at our IBC Young Adults pages, and we would love to get you connected. There's plenty of space for you to get plugged into a group. So I look forward to seeing you all on Thursday.
Welcome to week 2 in our series, Good News People. Last week, Kat Armstrong was with us, and she challenged and encouraged us to be good news people in our workplace and careers. This week and next week, we're going to be talking about how to be good news people when it comes to relationships. I'm going to start with kind of an overview, general, this is how you do relationships that are Jesus-centered, and then next week, Chad's going to do a deeper dive into how that looks specifically. My name is Camille Holland, and I'm the Young Adult Ministry Coordinator here at IBC. And if you remember, back in 2020, the world shut down, and it dramatically changed the way that we do relationships. We went from having people in our home, at least for us, we had people every week in our home, and we went from that to it being just our family every day. Thankfully, though, technology gave us a way to remain connected. Zoom exploded, Facebook became relevant again, and Instagram was our constant companion. And so even though we couldn't be together physically, we could still connect in a lot of different ways. However, the more time that we spent using technology, we realized it had a darker side, right? And a lot of us knew before, but if you didn't know before, you definitely knew now that there was a dark side to social media and the internet, right? And if you've seen the documentary, The Social Dilemma on Netflix, then you know exactly what I'm talking about. Social media and internet companies use data and algorithms to tailor content directly to us. So the more time we spend using it, the better it gets to know us and give us what we want. And so eventually our feed looks like us. It agrees with us. It promotes our ideals and our beliefs. And it becomes easy to dismiss anything that doesn't agree with us. And this tailoring sounds good, right? I mean, we can find the content that we want. We can connect with people who already agree with us, right? But what it does really is cause us to turn inward on ourselves, to focus more on what we want. And so the pandemic that changed our relationships by causing us to be physically, socially distant has also made us focus only on ourselves and what we need. And so now, 6 months or so later, the world is opening up again, right? We're still socially distant, but we're venturing out, trying to find a new normal. And we're beginning to realize that surviving the virus was only part of the battle, because the pandemic exposed our self-centeredness, our desire to preserve ourself and the status quo, to protect ourselves and our interests, and to dismiss experiences that we don't agree with. So how do we, as good news people, engage in relationships? Well, we're going to spend some time looking at the very complicated and significant relationship between Jesus and the Apostle Peter. Peter shows up early in the Gospels, and there are a few different stories detailing how he met Jesus, but my favorite is in the book of Luke, chapter 5. And so Peter, whose name at this point is Simon, is a fisherman, and Jesus has been teaching the crowds and sees Peter's boat and gets in it, and Peter puts out so that Jesus can continue teaching from the boat. Well, when Jesus is done teaching, he asks Peter to put out a little further so that they can catch some fish. So Peter tells Jesus, "We have been fishing all day and we've had no luck. There are no fish. But because you tell me to, I will go out again." And so while he's out there, he puts his net down and then he pulls up more fish than they can handle. So much fish that it causes the boats to almost sink. And so Peter is immediately ashamed at the way he kind of dismissed Jesus. And so he falls at his feet in repentance and he says, "Go away from me, Lord. I am a sinful man." But Jesus tells him, "Don't be afraid. From now on, you will fish for people." And I love this story because of the way that Jesus pursues Peter. Even though Peter dismisses him, Jesus tells Peter to not be afraid, that he has forgiven him, to get up, and he gives him a new job. Like, you have been a fisherman, but now I'm going to have you fish for people. And so it's a great story of restoration and redemption. But the thing is that Peter, his response is something we would all do, right? He responds sarcastically to Jesus. Jesus tells him, "Hey, let's go, put out and catch some fish." And Peter's like, "Okay, Jesus, I'll put my net down again because you tell me to." But I'm sure he was thinking, like some of us would, who does this guy think he is? At this point, he probably doesn't really know who Jesus is. So he's like, this rabbi is telling me to do this. Who does this guy think he is? I'm the fisherman. I'm the authority. I'm right. And that's what we think, right? We think we're the authority. We have access to all of the information. We're the filters. So we're right. And when someone comes and disagrees with us, we sarcastically respond, right? We dismiss it. And so when Jesus stands before us, Jesus himself stands before us and tells us something counter to what we think, we question it. We don't want to believe it, right? But thankfully, Jesus is not like us. He responds in grace to Peter. And like I said, he gives him a new job, to be a fisher for men. He says, let's try again. Let's start over. And so as we engage in relationships today, we need to be like Jesus, showing grace, offering second chances. Peter and Jesus have another significant moment just before Jesus is arrested and convicted and crucified. Jesus tells Peter at the Last Supper that he will betray him 3 times. Now, Peter denies this. He's appalled that Jesus would say this, and he restates his commitment to Jesus. But we'll see later in Matthew chapter 26, verses 69 through 75, exactly what happens. Peter does deny Jesus 3 times, literally saying, "I don't know the man." Now, we don't have time to examine all the little details and stories of how Jesus and Peter became close, but you should know that between this story and the first story, a lot has happened. Peter has moved into the inner circle. He is one of Jesus's most trusted companions, his closest friend. And yet he denies Jesus. He denies knowing him and betrays him. And that's like us sometimes, right? When things get hard in our relationships, we run. I mean, all of us have experienced, well, maybe not all of us, but a lot of us have probably experienced being ghosted. You're in a relationship or you're hanging out with someone and everything is good, and then all of a sudden you don't hear from them anymore. And you're left wondering what happened. Why the sudden shift in the relationship? Is it something that I did? Or maybe it's a friend, and our friend keeps challenging us all the time. They're challenging our thoughts on race. They're challenging our thoughts on women. They're challenging our thoughts on faith. And it makes us uncomfortable. So uncomfortable that we don't know if we want to be in the relationship anymore. And so if we're on social media, we just click that little unfriend button. I never knew you. We're all like Peter. We're like him on our best days when he's leading the church and committed to Christ, but we're also like him on his worst days, right? When he's trying to put distance between himself and Jesus. Because to side with Jesus back then and today could mean public ridicule. What are the people going to say? I don't want to be with him. And for Peter, it could even mean death. I mean, Jesus has just been arrested. And so he denies Jesus 3 times. And at the end of the story, we find Peter weeping bitterly because of what he's done. From his point of view, he's destroyed the relationship. He has disowned the only person that mattered. To him, he thinks there's no way back. And then Jesus dies. And remember, Peter doesn't know that there's a resurrection coming. So he's thinking that his selfish decisions are the last thing that he did before Jesus dies. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine the weight of that? Well, thankfully, there is a resurrection, right? Jesus rises from the dead. And there is another significant moment that he has with Peter. Again, they're on the shore by the sea. And this time they're eating fish. They're having fish for breakfast. And Jesus acknowledges Peter and he says, "Peter, do you love me?" And Peter says, "Of course, you know that I love you." But Jesus asks him the question 3 times. And each time Peter says yes. And then Jesus says, "Follow me." Now, if you read Acts, you'll see that Peter goes on and leads the church. And he invites Gentiles in. He takes what he has learned and he spreads the good news to others, inviting all people, those who are on the inside and those who are on the outside. Following Jesus is not the easy path. It's not the popular path. It's not the most traveled path. It is a difficult path. And it's difficult because we have to think of ourselves last. Self-preservation is not on the table. The gospel is good news, but it is hard news. It's a shift in perspective. The pandemic and social media and the internet have taught us to be self-focused. But to follow Christ and to develop real, significant relationships, we need to be other-focused. And in this challenging season, the world is looking at you, at other followers of Jesus, and they're saying, you were with Jesus, weren't you? You follow Jesus, you know him. And sometimes it's as if we are saying, well, I don't know. Is Jesus a Republican? Oh, well, I never knew him. Is he a Democrat? I don't know the man. Is he involved in justice issues? I don't know who you're talking about. Does he disagree with me? I never knew him. And our friends, the people who are watching what's happening, the people that we're trying to build relationships with are listening. And this is what they're hearing when we say that. They're hearing, are you a Republican? Well, I don't want to know you. Are you a Democrat? Well, I can't be around you. Did you go to a protest? Well, I don't want to listen to you. Are you hurting? I can't hear you. Is your experience different from mine? Well, I don't believe you. Do you disagree with me? I don't care. And is that really how we want to be known? Is that what it means to be a good news, Jesus-following, gospel-centered person in the world? Is that how we build relationships? No, of course not. So what if we were different? What if we showed the world a third way? Not an us versus them kind of way, but a path that invites everyone in, right? What if we were good news people who actually shared the good news of Jesus with those around us? That he forgives us, that he draws us in close, and that he invites the outside in. Then maybe we could begin to build relationships that look different. Relationships that are rich in diversity of thought, diversity of skin color, diversity of experience. And we could honor one another and believe one another and trust one another and build beautiful, strong communities that are not self-serving, but are other-focused. So that's my hope for you guys. I want you to hear the story of Peter and Jesus, and I want you to see the gracious attitude that Jesus had toward Peter, and what that did for Peter. and that we might have gracious attitudes toward those that we engage with on a daily basis, and build really great, good news people kind of relationships. Thanks, guys.